Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar presented by uShip and hosted by your friends here at FurnitureToday. We're going to wait just a few more moments to officially get started so that we give everyone a chance to log on. Before we start today's presentation, I have just a couple housekeeping items to cover. First, if you should have any connection problems during the webinar, please try logging out and logging back in with the same link. However, if you can't reconnect, don't worry. This webinar is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it on demand afterward. And second, during the webinar, if you have any questions for our panel, we encourage you to please submit them using the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen. We'll have a Q&A session after the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Please welcome Janet Vito, Vice President of Marketing and Sales for uShip.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Very excited to be here. Thank you for taking the time. So as Bradley said, my name is Janet Vito. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Sales at uShip. And if you haven't heard of uShip, in a nutshell, we are an online marketplace that connects businesses with thousands of feedback rated carriers to help ship large and bulky items, so things that don't fit in a box. And the carriers have types of equipment such as sprinter vans, box trucks, pickup trailer combinations, things that are ideal for furniture, residential areas, and then some. Last year alone, we had over 850,000 shipments listed on uShip. That's about one every 37 seconds. So we've been very, very pleased with how we've been doing over the years. And I'm super excited to be joined today by Alpay Koralturk. Now, he is the CEO and founder of Kaiyo. We've been working with Kaiyo for, I think, almost a couple of years now. Alpay, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Janet, and the team at uShip. So my name is Alpay. Again, I'm the founder and CEO of Kaiyo, a full-service furniture marketplace committed to making great designs accessible to everyone conveniently and sustainably. Prior to Kaiyo, I had a different business in a totally unrelated industry in gaming that ended up being a life-changing outcome when Zynga acquired us a couple of years back. I currently work full-time on Kaiyo. Our mission here is to make, again, great designs accessible to everyone sustainably and conveniently. That to us means making, buying and selling furniture, used furniture, returned furniture, excess inventory, anything that's open box, extremely, extremely easy to do, which is really where we see a lot of pain points. And we do that through a lot of technology that we've built in-house that helps power our own logistics network in the regions where we operate. We also use the same kind of technology to do pricing for us. We have extremely high sell-through rates, and we can sell your pieces with a lot of value protected, as well, brand value protected as well. And we really pride ourselves on having a world-class customer experience also. We currently work in the Northeast primarily, in the New York, Philadelphia, DC, and Baltimore metros, but we recently raised a good chunk of money from some very important investors, and we will be launching, starting with California, across the country as well. We use uShip, as Janet alluded to earlier, for reaching a nationwide network, which we don't plan to build out ourselves. So it's been a very rewarding and exciting time to be together. Very excited to share our thoughts with you and learnings with you along the way.
Thanks, Alpay. That was great. Okay, so today our webinar, 3 keys to extracting maximum value from furniture returns. So what you will learn today is how your return policy can drive buyer loyalty, how to think differently about your return delivery network, how to tap into the pre-owned furniture resale market, and of course, Alpay will be giving insight on Kaiyo's perspective and insights along the way. So let's get started. So want to delay some groundwork before we get into these 3 key ways. First is really the role of the supply chain. So the term supply chain is seemingly everywhere. between COVID lockdowns, container shortages, e-commerce growth, inflationary pressures, political climate, I feel like supply chain is now this household term where people weren't saying it before. So if you look at that stat on the right there, just in search volume alone, just people searching the term supply chain, that has seen 173% increase on average when we look at it a few years ago. And so a big part that's driving this is e-commerce. The second stat, almost $168 billion is the projected retail e-commerce revenue from furniture and homeware sales in 2023. And that's going to represent almost 12% of all e-commerce sales, which is amazing to me. And of course, more sales equals more returns. It's part of the business. That last stat I found surprising. 30% of all products, so not just large and bulky, but anything that's bought online actually gets returned, which is amazing, right? Versus I think the stat we're most used to hearing is that 9%, a return rate, 9-10% return rate for in-store sales. So despite all this, reverse logistics remains a blind spot for a lot of retailers. So Kaiyo, Alpay, maybe you could just talk a little bit about how just this recent, 2 to 3 years of all these macroeconomic factors have influenced your business. You might be muted.
Sorry about that. For us, the big change is really around people being more willing to pay for items that are ready to go. Frankly, even prior to COVID, we had seen instances at Kaiyo where we could sell items at a higher price point, actually, believe it or not, than you could order them brand new. There are many websites where you can just register for a newsletter and you can get 15, 20, 25% off just by doing that. A lot of top brands that sell at Kaiyo.com actually sell on average around those price points. And obviously there are products that beat that as well. So overall, the trend that while that was something we had seen before, that trend has definitely improved. The average discount we sell at today on Kaiyo.com has reduced quite significantly over the last 2.5 years or so since the start of COVID and everything else that came with it. But the big thing, the pain point that we still see, and the reason why we've been hearing from more and more brands over the last 1.5 years or so, furniture retailers, is really around reverse logistics being a huge pain point, and folks getting more and more conscious about ESG efforts as well. It's another big paradigm shift we've seen along with the supply chain issues.
Thanks for that. It's very helpful. So why does reverse logistics matter? I think some of it's obvious. When we first think of the impact that it has, it's not just the customer experience. So if you've bought a piece of furniture or something large or anything really, just the idea of returning it can be a hassle, but there's a whole brand perception around it, right? The brand perception that customers have, not just in buying the item, getting it delivered, but the return process is really important. Other areas, that returns impact, internal management, right? Sales in general and your repeat buyers, finance and accounting, warehousing, logistics management, environmental compliance. So all of these things, plus some, can be impacted by returns and reverse logistics. So if you look at that, stat on the right, 95% of consumers said they would buy from a brand again if they had a positive return experience. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that while this 30% of online products are returned, a lot of folks will buy again from that same retailer that they returned the product to. And then the second stat, 2/3 of shoppers actually check out the returns page or the policy, however you have that presented in your online site. So it's a really important part about that. So moving to, I jumped ahead. So before we get into the 3 key ways, wanted to have a polling question. And so I'm going to see if I can make this work. Should be seeing on your screen now. So the question is, how do you currently handle returns? Do you resell through your company outlet? Do you let the customer keep it? Do you sell through a third-party marketplace like Kaiyo? Do you toss it? Or is there something else? So while those are coming up, I was just reflecting on a good friend of mine had a recent experience from a furniture retailer who shall go nameless. And he had bought some furniture online. And one of the items he needed to return for whatever reason. And the retailer was really good about arranging for that. And the person came to pick it up. And he just happened to ask him, well, what do you guys do with this stuff? Right. And the person that came to pick it up said, well, we just toss it. And so that was really disappointing to my friend. So he's not only told me, I've heard him tell multiple people, and he's probably not going to buy from that retailer again. All right, looks like we have a lot of good results here. I'm going to end the poll. All right, so can you guys see that on the screen there? So about 48%. Oh, let me do share results. I'll get there. I'm learning. About 48% of you said you resell. Second place is let the customer keep it, and you have some selling through the marketplace. Good to see a very small number that do not put it in the landfill. Okay, I'm going to click here. All right, so let's move on to the topic. 3 keys to extracting maximum value from furniture returns. Number 1, audit your return policy. Okay. So nobody wants to deal with returns, but they're definitely a reality, and it's something you can't avoid. So the first stat, almost a third of shoppers who would be willing to buy something that costs more than $1,000, right, would do it if the return could be free. Only 10% though, if you didn't offer a free return policy, would purchase it. So it definitely has an effect on, people have a lot of anxiety when they buy high dollar valuable items online. And so having a free return policy really makes a big difference. The second stat is around cart abandonment rate. So it's pretty high for the home and furnishing industry, about 74%. And, there's a lot of things that go into why somebody abandons their cart. But as I just mentioned before, it's just because somebody's buying a high value item, you're already going to have a higher cart abandonment rate than you would for, if I'm just buying a blender. And so it's definitely something to keep in mind. And so while your return policy may not be one of the leading causes of folks abandoning the cart, it definitely will help if you have a return policy that's easily understood, easily found, and very customer centric. So the key aspects of your return policy that you should evaluate are time. Like, what is your return window? Do you have a 30-day policy, a 60-day policy? Money? Do you offer a full refund? Do you refund the shipping if you're charging for shipping, for example? Effort. I can recall years ago when you'd had to go through all these hoops to get rebates and returns. Do you make it easy, or is it rather difficult for your customer to initiate that return? Exchange. Do you offer store credit in addition to some sort of refund? And then scope. Are you only offering returns for non-sale items, for example? So these are all elements that you need to consider when you're evaluating your return policy. So here's a few paths you can take if you're not already doing this. Back to your team. First one sounds very obvious: make product information accurate and easy to find. How many times as the reason for the return is item not as described? The second one, make that return policy visible just to reduce people wondering what it is. Make it as part of the checkout flow, prior to the checkout flow. Third, if you are doing any sustainability efforts with your returns, promote that, build brand awareness and perception. And then you might consider extending your return window to foster buyers' attachment rates. So maybe you have a 30-day return policy. Maybe you extend it to 60 days or to 45 days. Maybe to help squelch the whole buyer's remorse. A lot of times people do return things because of that. You could go all in on your return policy and make it very liberal to engender brand loyalty. And of course, not all policies are one size fits all. You might have different policies depending on the product. So Alpay, before I jump on, I just wanted to know if you had anything else to add here.
The promotion of the sustainability effort, I think, is one that I was going to mention because I didn't see it on the previous slide. It's obviously not the highest priority right now, but the paradigm shift we're seeing, and we hear this from, without naming any names, some of the biggest retailers in the country, is that there's a lot of conversation happening at the moment at the senior management and board levels around this, because there's a new couple of generations of folks coming in that look at this and sustainability efforts and what you do with excess items or return items. And this new group that's coming in consider this a major factor in purchase decisions, according to research that was put out by Nielsen several years back. So I can't imagine that paradigm shift is reversing. If anything, I think more folks now who are, who used to think differently, perhaps before COVID and before having to opt into buying used products, whether it's furniture or other categories, are now getting more and more sensitive to. And obviously, you can strengthen your return policy to the max at the end of the day, but it needs to also make bottom line sense for you. So it's not just that you need to lean into these things, but you need to also keep a very clear perspective on and clear KPIs around what are you getting out of the returns? Are you able to salvage the value? What does it cost you to do that in terms of dollars, in terms of effort, in terms of brand value as well? What you don't want at the end of the day, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later down the line in this presentation, what you don't want is your product selling 5 cents on the dollar on a liquidation store, right? That hurts you in different ways. It starts to cannibalize your own retail business. So those are the things that we obviously care about a lot at Kaiyo, and we'd be happy to provide more insight or help with.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay. Number 2. Like I said, we only have 3 of these, so this will go. We won't take up too much of your time. You need to audit your return shipping model. So fun fact, it's not so fun. A forklift has never lost a fight with a sofa or a chest of drawers. So if you're selling new furniture, in a lot of cases, you're either getting that offshore or you have there's many large manufacturers here in the US, for example. That freight is well packaged. It might be flat pack, it might be crated, you name it. And it gets picked up by an LTL provider using a forklift, right? It gets consolidated a few times, taken off the truck, put back on a different truck, and then it finally reaches the metro area where you have your final mile courier pick it up, bring it into the house, deliver it, take the packaging away, maybe assemble it. And then 10 days later, the customer wants to return the item, which is probably a much more fragile state because all that packaging has been removed. And so that could be your biggest liability when you think about the returns, because you don't have, meaning the biggest liability will be your traditional freight, because you don't have those items packaged. So having a program where the carrier will pick it up, blanket wrap it, make sure it's safe and secure so you don't incur maybe further damages or damage it in the first place on the return shipment is key. So thinking about common friction points, talked a little bit about damages. Like I said, especially assembled items or, even a couch. A lot of people think couches are pretty sturdy, but the forklift just has to be a little bit off for you to poke a hole in it. So it's a big part. You don't want the item to come back damaged at all if it's not damaged or more damaged because of that shipping process. The second thing is shipping rates. The rates that you're used to seeing for your outbound don't necessarily apply for the inbound because it's not the same type of freight. You also have, your model might be, you have 8 or 9 different warehouses, major warehouses across the US. So your origin locations are limited. But when you talk about returns, that becomes much more disparate origin locations. So your pricing isn't going to be what you're used to. And so having it's very important to be able to predict and have transparent pricing to understand what it costs to bring that back in terms of the cost of shipping. Insurance, should you buy additional cargo insurance? Do you need that? Because maybe it's a higher value item for the return. Can you do that easily? Of course, coordination, just as you had to coordinate with the customer on delivery, You have to coordinate them with them on pickup. And then last but not least, for sure, is service quality. So, how fast are they getting to you? What is the quality of service in that whole experience? So looking to recommendations, first of all, suggest that, you embrace first to last mile. Now, there's a lot of talk about this recently, but this is what uShip has been doing for quite some time. And I will talk a little bit about that on the following slide. Second, that need for the transparent, predictable pricing on the return shipment costs is very important. That's so you can understand, as Alpay said, how this affects the total encompassment of what this affects your bottom line. You should, depend on blanket wrap services over LTL on the return scenario. LTL works wonderfully for outbound and dock to dock, but it just doesn't do so well with an LTL provider picking up something loose like this. And we just know from talking to a lot of customers that have tried it. And then expect room of choice pickup. You don't want your customer to have to put the couch out onto the driveway. That would just be not a great experience for the customer, and they might actually damage the item more. And then the other key element is ensure coverage, carrier coverage, that is, with a strong network. And so, like I said, you will have a lot of disparate origin locations. And so you want to make sure you have coverage to pick that up, and then make it easy to add insurance on those higher value items for the return. So Alpay, anything else you would like to add here?
No, this is spot on. I mean, I can't imagine there's anybody on this call who hasn't had pains with reverse logistics and things getting damaged unnecessarily. We work with several brands, and we've had them drop off items. They had their third-party warehouse folks, for example, drop off items that just didn't have any blankets on them. Gorgeous white couches that retail at 5 to 10K coming in with unnecessary rips, stains that obviously didn't happen in the 2 days that the customer kept the item. So very crucial points. Absolutely.
All right, so let me touch a little bit more on what is first to last mile delivery. A little bit of a uShip plug. Like I said, we've been doing this since we opened up our marketplace in our business back in 2004. And essentially, it is the carrier picks up the item and it doesn't leave that truck until it's delivered. So this is not a traditional freight model. And so where you have a number of different touch points where the item is being removed and put back in, removed, put back in. And this is especially important and critical for those fully assembled items, or if you are selling, used or vintage, anything that's not packaged. So we have a customer that is not a Kaiyo competitor. They're actually a rowing company, rowing equipment. So I'll bring them up, and they essentially use uShip for this purpose. So for their outbound to their customers, they work with a really great 3PL. Their machines are built in China. They have come over, they've got warehouse distribution. They actually designed a really cool crate that, like, me and my husband could take this thing out of the crate. Like, they made it really easy for the end customer to even take it out of the package, and assemblies like just mount the screen. And so as their business grew, they started getting more returns. They were using the same freight providers to pick up those returns. And so what they were finding is maybe the customers were returning it because they had buyer's remorse, and then it would come back with the screen smashed. And they started working with us because of this ability to do first to last mile delivery. Somebody going in the home room of choice to pick up the item, blanket wrap it, and it not leaving that truck till it gets to its destination. So I will move to the third and final way to extract maximum value from furniture returns. And that would be number 3, tap into the pre-owned furniture market. Okay. So if you look at the first stat on the left, $16.6 billion. So that's the amount of secondhand furniture that's expected to be sold by 2025. And that's up 70% from 2018, right? Add to this, already today, 2/3 of US homes have resale home goods inside of them. So, this growth comes from a number of macroeconomic factors happening recently. One, early in the pandemic, we had all the supply chain issues, right, from items coming from overseas. But also, buyers today are much more, as Alpay was talking about earlier, environmentally conscious than previous generations. The idea of wasting something that might go in a landfill just is not appealing. So the neighborhood that you're looking at the right is meant to show, that the secondhand market is happening. There are a number of ways that you can, as you guys answered in your survey, that you can, deal with your returns. And clearly, Kaiyo's aftermarket site is definitely one of those. So let me just do one more here. So what's done with returns, right? So these were some of the choices that we had for you all to fill out. And it was great to see a good chunk of you do resell in your company outlet. I would imagine that's regional. So if it's coming from a very remote area, you may not have the opportunity to do that. If it's just sitting in a warehouse, it's wasting space and costing you money. Sending it to a landfill really, I think I read this stat that 10 million tons of furniture and cushions end up in landfills every year. That's a lot. You might consider donating some of that to charity. So that's another way to promote your brand as well. Letting the buyers keep the item. I think about if my mother were to buy a blender online and it was the wrong color, and she said, I want to return it. And they said, oh, you can keep it. We'll send you the right color. Well, that works out because she'll probably give me the other blender that she didn't like. But if it's a couch, it just doesn't work out. What is my mother supposed to do with an extra sofa, right? So it's a big hassle. And then of course, the last one, which is closest to Alpay's heart, which is selling items on third-party sites like Kaiyo. So anything else you want to add here, Alpay?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I would mention, I guess, is that there is a general resignation in some cases to the idea that you can do anything meaningful in terms of bottom line improvement without an absurd amount of effort when it comes to this product, because of the fact that the logistics is actually really intensive. It's not like bags or shoes or apparel where you just stuff it in a bag and USPS or UPS takes care of it for you. What we at Kaiyo are really trying hard to change, and we've been very successful in the Northeast where we work today, is really changing the economics of this so that if you have anything that's sitting on a shelf that you're not trying to sell someplace and you're paying rent on, there's absolutely no reason today for you to do that. We will provide you the logistics, just send them to us. We'll do the receiving. We'll do all of this free of charge. We'll do the receiving. We'll do cleaning on all products. We'll do photography on them, high resolution photos that you see on the website. We do the marketing, the delivery, and everything else. And you get to have an actual real return on those products. We have partners where they actually make more than the cost of the item. So they still end up turning a profit on something that used to be a headache for them, where they had to just get them dumped basically every few months when the third-party warehouse was filled to a certain place. So that's the kind of thing that, that is new. I think the reason why furniture is starting to really grow on the secondhand category recently is because other sectors have paved the way for us, right? Sectors like, the apparel sites like the Rebags and the Real Reels and ThreadUps of the world have made people realize, hey, I can spend actually a little bit less, get the thing that I really want from a trusted place, and at the same time feel good about it. I'm not contributing to the manufacturing economy. I'm doing something circular, so I feel good about this, and I'm actually going to buy more products from this brand that I really love. So that mindset shift has been happening for some time. Obviously, it accelerated through COVID, and it's only now coming into the furniture space. So I think we're in the very early days of this. I think we're going to see a heck of a lot more growth and changes happening, across the sector.
That's absolutely right. Completely agree with that. So some considerations in terms of re-commerce. First, brand value protection. Alpay mentioned this. You don't want the returned item to be sold for 5 cents on the dollar, not just because that's cheap, but also the perception of your brand, right? So you want to make sure that the item, the used item or the returned item that you're selling represents the same quality, brand quality and experience as it does for the new item. You of course need to consider revenue cannibalization. Does this eat into your new sales? You want to have that positive resale experience, make it a good experience and however you sell that returned item. And then of course, as Alpay mentioned, meaningful to the bottom line. You can't just pour money into something, but you have to make it meaningful to the bottom line. A couple of stats on the right, today, 86% of shoppers love to hunt for pre-owned or vintage or antique furnishings. And almost half of Americans in 2020 bought an item through resale, right? So, there's a big opportunity for e-commerce if you're not doing it already. As said, millennials and now Zoomers love the thrill of the hunt. Buyers expect sustainability, and that's not just the younger generation. I think Gen X leads the pack in terms of that. Those pandemic driven remodels, right? Everybody was sitting around in their homes or apartments and didn't like what they saw, led to people being much more comfortable with large online buys. And so I agree with Alpay's prediction. We're early stages in this with furniture because it's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure many people never thought they would buy something like as important as a couch or a nice piece of furniture online before seeing it. So this is real, and I think there's a way for every retailer to make it a win-win that will ultimately, help drive revenue and your bottom line. All right, so closing thoughts. Let's just recap what we covered. Reverse logistics are no longer an afterthought, right? You need to be proactive thinking about how you're going to get those items back. You should strengthen your return policy to preempt returns. Your go-to transport model may not be the best way to handle your returns, and the young buying audience is driving the resale trend. And last, sustainability is a brand value that buyers seek. So with that, I will open it up to questions. If you could use the Q&A function to post your question, and we'll read a few of those aloud. Let's see. Okay, I have one question here. What kind of transport companies and truck capacity are available on uShip? So uShip is like I said, a marketplace with thousands of feedback rated carriers that ship large and bulky items in a number of different commodities, furniture and household goods being one of them, but also cars and, boats and LTL freight offering as well. But for furniture specifically, they're owner operators. The carriers are owner operators. They built their businesses on uShip. uShip is very valuable to them in terms of having them build and grow their businesses. And so that capacity, you might have a owner operator that's just one person plus maybe one team member, and they might have 2 or 3 vehicles, box truck, sprinter van. You might have a larger carrier that's got, 10, 15 different assets. They're very experienced in this type of freight. So that hopefully that answers your question. Another question. Which markets do you service? So for uShip, we are a global company, but our strongest areas are US, Canada for sure, in terms of who we service. And then I believe Alpay, if you want to answer that as well, which markets do you service? I think you touched on it earlier.
We're currently in the Northeast. We're about to launch California in the next 2 months, but we have I believe at this point 6 or 7 different warehouses across the Northeast. So we work with brands that do drop shipping to us basically, so that we can handle their returns and so forth. So that's absolutely possible, even if we're not in your main category today, main service area today.
Okay. Let's see, Bob has a question. Can you pick up an item from one home and deliver it to another within the same marketplace? So from the uShip perspective, yes, that is not an issue, but Alpay, Kaiyo's model is a little bit different because they want to make sure it's good quality stuff. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, Alpay?
Yeah, I mean, with a direct B2B partnership, we would already flush out what items we would handle and which ones we wouldn't. Usually, if we're working with a brand, we handle everything that they do. It's very rare that we would tell you we wouldn't touch this category of yours versus another. The way we work usually is there are several ways brands leverage us. There are folks who use us as a returns as a service company where they just pass on their return customer information and we go do the pickup and we just put it through our process and it's free of charge for them end to end. And then they get a kickback basically when we sell the products. That obviously is only possible where we do in the Northeast. There are other cases where folks will, as I was alluding to earlier, batch ship items to one of our warehouses in the Northeast, and then we will go through the process. But we always go through that process basically before we sell something on Kaiyo.com. The trust that comes from our photography and inspection notes and rating on our website is very critical to our buyers, to the used furniture buyer, which is looking for something very different from a new furniture shopper. At the end of the day, they want to trust that this is the thing it looks like, that it's doesn't have a huge hole on the other end, things like that. So those things we definitely, as to protect our brand, we want to make sure we handle, we look at, we depict accurately, and then once we sell, we can absolutely deliver within the marketplace service area.
All right. Let's see. Steve is saying you use the term sustainability related to returns. Can you elaborate? So what we mean by that is the returned item, instead of leaving it up to the customer to figure out what to do with it, take charge of that return item. Don't put it in a landfill, right? Don't let it sit with us. Do something with it, right? Because we want to be able to, much more environmentally conscious generation these days and buyers, and whether you're going to resell it or donate it to charity, but that's basically what we mean by that. The next question, let's see, shipping insurance companies familiar with uShip. So on uShip, we do have an ability to easily add cargo insurance to any shipment on a per shipment basis. And, we have a policy with Roanoke that's backed by Lloyd's of London, and it basically protects the item during shipment. And so can certainly follow up with more details on that, but that's definitely an option that we have. Let's see. The Bob is asking, can you pick up Costco goods from their local UPS container receiving centers, mainly wet boxes only, and ship to other furniture retailers, usually in the same region of the country? Yes, that is definitely possible. And here's one for Alpay. What are the most popular resellable types of furniture?
Usually the bulky pieces that are one, very difficult to move logistically, and two, tend to be on the more expensive end. So think about, definitely couches is our, one of our bread and butter categories on Kaiyo.com. Things like dressers, dining sets, beds, those are the things that are quite difficult basically to handle for the average consumer. And they look for deals on those products as well, deals and convenience on those products.
Okay. Another question, does Kaiyo have a weight limit? Our furniture is heavy. Well, I can tell you uShip doesn't have a weight limit. What about Kaiyo?
We don't have a weight limit either. Our service, again, is free of charge. We do everything end to end in our service areas, and what we handle. There are certain types of products that we won't handle at the moment. For example, marble is one of those things. I don't know if the heaviness comes from items being stone, but outside of a few tweaks, like caveats like that, we handle anything and everything.
Okay. All right. How are we doing on time? Okay. Well, if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up. We get a list of all the questions and who asked them. But I see we are running low on time. I want to be very respectful of everybody's time. Once again, thank you very much for attending today. And as Bradley mentioned with Furniture Today, they will be sending out recording of this webinar. Thank you, everybody.